Hi, this is Tom DeWeese, President of the American Policy Center, and welcome to the 7th of our local activist training webinars. The question keeps coming up is we've been focusing on our previous webinars mostly on what to do at the local level, how to organize, how to build a team, and so forth. And one of the things that keeps coming up is what do we do with the federal government? The federal government is all powerful and they can come in and override anything we try to do on the local level and so forth. Well, it's a legitimate question and there are legitimate, effective answers to that. And one of them that we're going to deal with today is the issue of nullification. The founding fathers built into the Constitution a means if a law is passed by Congress that is not constitutional, then it is not law. And we're going to discuss that, what to do with it, how we deal with all this. And I'm very pleased that my special guest today to join me on this is Alex Newman, who is the senior editor of New American Magazine, that I believe is probably the best magazine in the country that is right on top of all of these issues. And Alex is one of those writers that contributes such great information to it. So Alex, welcome. It's good to have you with us. And I'm ready to get things underway here. The nullification issue, by the way, the John Birch Society, which publishes the New American Magazine, has put together an excellent little pamphlet called Article 6, The Founder's Brilliant Solution to Big Government. And this really deals with solutions. So they have that document there. So Alex, there's several questions here as we look at nullification. Is a lot of people have different opinions of how you get started, how you impose this. And there are some who say that we have to put together some sort of a bill through a state legislature or something to just say we're not going to follow a bill. And there are others that say, no, that's not the way to do it at all. It's simply an illegal law and we don't have to follow it. So let's first of all begin with talking about the details of nullification, what it really means, and then we'll get into what we do about it as we go forward. So can you address that, talking about nullification and what it really means?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Tom. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you on the webinar. Thank you for what you're doing. I love the idea of training local activists to get involved. That's really where we are winning some of the key battles. And when conservatives say that nullification is not a good strategy, I tell them, look, you obviously haven't been paying attention to the political realm for first of all, the last 4 years, and before that, many years prior. A really good example of nullification in action is what a lot of states did on the marijuana issue. And look, right now we're talking about nullification. I don't care where people fall on the marijuana issue. If you think marijuana ought to be banned, if you don't, it's not my thing, right? It's just, we'll leave that issue aside. The important issue is the nullification component. And I think that it offers a really good roadmap for how it's done. It started off, there's a federal law on the books, the Controlled Substances Act, which is actually required or purportedly required under various UN agreements that purport to mandate the criminalization of this particular plant and its use and its manufacture and so on. Well, we started off with states across the union saying, hey, there are medicinal properties to this medicine, and we are going to ignore that federal law and we're going to approve it, at least in our state, for use for medical reasons. That began, and then Colorado took center stage. They said, you know what, we're going to go a step further. We're going to nullify those federal statutes completely. We're not even going to pretend like there's any medical purpose here. If you want to smoke marijuana, you can smoke marijuana in our state. Now, this was soft nullification, right? The feds at any time could theoretically drop in with a SWAT team and the FBI and the ATF and who knows what else and arrest a grower of marijuana, even if that grower is complying with every I and every T under state law. But the important thing is the state said, this federal law exists, but that's okay, we're going to do things differently. And all by itself, that's an incredibly important development, Tom. And that is soft nullification. What the state is saying is, hey, not only are we not going to assist in the enforcement of this unconstitutional federal law, and I think marijuana is a good example of an unconstitutional federal law. Whatever you may think about prohibition, just like they needed an amendment to prohibit alcohol, they needed an amendment to prohibit marijuana or any other substance. And so the state said, look, you don't have that power. We're going to do our thing over here. Now, there are other states that are going even a step further, and we're seeing this now a lot in response to the gun issue. We're seeing conservative states saying, look, not only are we not going to help you enforce this, not only are we not going to respect that statute here in our jurisdiction, we are actually going to actively block enforcement of that statute or that executive order or whatever it might be coming down the pike. And we're going to order our law enforcement, our state and our local law enforcement, to arrest anybody involved with the enforcement of that unconstitutional statute. So that's the next step beyond that. But when people say that that's not a constitutional solution, that's not a legitimate solution, I say, look, first of all, the Democrats are doing it, and they've been doing it for a long time. Second of all, if we want to find out if something is constitutional, why don't we consult the guy who actually was primarily responsible for writing the Constitution, James Madison? And Thomas Jefferson, of course, was the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. Both of these guys commented on this. Thomas Jefferson described it in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions as the rightful remedy to federal usurpations of power beyond what the Constitution delegates. Madison described it, said that states were, and I'm quoting here, duty-bound to interpose to arrest the progress of evil. So when the federal government is getting out of control, when they're violating the contract that authorized their existence, right? The states came together, they created a contract, they said, federal government, we authorize you to do these things. It's very similar to, you know, I just used this metaphor recently on this subject. If I hired a plumber to come and fix my pipes and he shows up and starts painting my house orange, you know, I'd say, hey, you're violating the contract. Not only am I not going to pay you for what you're doing, I'm going to hold you accountable. Well, the states in this case, as the originators of this contract, have the power to say, look, you are not authorized to do that under this contract. Not only are we not going to obey, we're going to take active measures to ensure that the contract is fulfilled. And, you know, finally, I'll leave it at Article 6, Tom, and then I'll kick it back to you. Under Article 6, we hear this a lot, the supremacy clause. Well, the Constitution says that all federal laws are supreme. That's the supremacy clause. That's actually not what the Constitution says. If you go and read the Constitution, it says that the laws passed in pursuance thereof, right? Laws that are made in pursuance thereof that are constitutional become part of the supreme law of the land. If they're not constitutional, to quote our Supreme Court, they are null and void. They are of no effect. They are usurpations. And not only are the states not bound to obey them, the states, according to James Madison, are duty-bound to interpose. So it is a viable solution. It has been used by Democrats for many, many years, sometimes properly, sometimes not properly. And conservatives need to get a handle on this because this is one of our primary tools to keep the federal government in check.
Right. Yeah, this is the thing. This is where the confusion comes in. Just what you were just talking about. You know, a lot of people mention the 10th Amendment is what gives the states the power, and it's really not. It's Article 6. And when we, you know, every single elected official who is elected puts his hand in the air and puts his hand on the Bible or whatever else he chooses and says that he will defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies and, you know, so forth. And the Constitution gives the federal government, what is it, 17 enumerated powers. And that is all it is allowed to do. Everything else is left to the states. The reason states have state constitutions, and we talk about, you know, that they are, you know, independent and so forth, that the federal government can't tell the states this, but what needs to happen, and rather than, and this is where we get down into what to do about it, there's a lot of confusion on it, is some people think that the states have to put up some kind of a bill and pass it and say, we're not going to follow this law, and because it's not constitutional. But then another state might say, well, no, we don't have any problem with it. Well, then you end up in all kinds of chaos. Well, is it or isn't it? And then you have federal agents that come in and say, well, you're going to have to follow this law. You're going to have to enforce this. And what Hamilton said, what Madison said, what Jefferson said were all, if it is unconstitutional, if it's something that overreaches those enumerated powers that the federal government has, then they just should ignore it. they don't have to do anything else, just ignore it and not impose that law. Is that your reading of it as well?
Yeah, that is absolutely an option. And actually, James Madison in Federalist Paper number 46, he says that one of the best checks that the states have against federal abuses is just to, and I'm quoting here, a refusal to cooperate with the officers of the union. And I mean, this has been litigated even recently, all the way up to the Supreme Court. Sheriff Richard Mack, you and I know him, Tom. We've shared the stage with him at various events. And this became a big issue. The Clinton administration passed some crazy gun control bill. And the sheriff said, hey, I'm not going to enforce that. That's ridiculous. It's unconstitutional. I don't work for you guys anyway. I work for the people in my county. And so as far as I'm concerned, that's not a law in my county. And that actually, it was litigated. It went through the federal court system all the way up to the Supreme Court. It was Prince versus the United States. And Sheriff Mack and Sheriff Prince won this case. And the Supreme Court established once again, right? It wasn't a new doctrine. It was called the Anti-Commandeering Doctrine. And the Supreme Court said very plainly, look, under our constitutional system of government, our states and our local governments are independent entities. They were not created by the federal government. They don't answer to the federal government. And you cannot compel, even if it were a constitutional law, they couldn't compel the sheriffs to cooperate in the enforcement of these laws. Certainly not in the case of an unconstitutional law. And we're actually seeing this right now, Tom. I was very pleased to see the governor of Oklahoma, no legislation necessary. Biden passed all these crazy executive orders. We're not going to drill. We're not going to let you drill. We're not going to have pipelines, you know, all this stuff. And the governor of Oklahoma simply said, look, he doesn't have the power to do that. I'm hereby ordering all state agencies to resist this and to just continue as normal and ignore these silly unconstitutional executive orders from Joe Biden. And guess what? They're still pulling oil out of the ground. They're still doing what they need to do in the state of Oklahoma. So we need governors and state legislators and sheriffs and city commissions and county commissions all across this country to recognize you are not only not bound to obey an unconstitutional law or to enforce an unconstitutional law, you have a duty to resist it, whether there is legislation at the, and you know, I think, frankly, legislation at the state level can be a good tool, but it's not necessary. Just because your state hasn't passed a law saying that the sheriffs are not to cooperate in gun confiscation doesn't mean that the sheriffs have to cooperate in unconstitutional gun confiscation. They can say, hey, Constitution says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Constitution of my state says God gave everybody here a right to own a gun to defend their life, their liberty, their property. And therefore, I don't care about Biden's executive orders. That's not going to be enforced here. And to take it one step further, if some goofy guy with a goofy costume from Washington, D.C. comes into your county and starts trying to disarm law-abiding citizens and take away their property, the sheriff then, I think, has a duty to step in and say, look, these are my constituents. My obligation is to protect their rights. That's why I have this job, and you're violating their rights. And so we're going to have to take you down to the county jail, and you're going to explain to the magistrate tomorrow morning what in the world you think you're doing by breaking into people's houses.
Yeah, this is exactly the crux of it, of how we fight back on this, is that first of all, we have state legislators, mayors, governors, and so forth that understand what their constitutional duties are, and that if this is overstepping, and if the federal government sent this, I'm just summing what you just said, the federal government sends in agents saying you will do this, then the sheriffs stand up and say no, and you're not going to come in here and do that. So what we have here is a massive education system that has to take place, because we have so many state legislators that don't understand their power and their responsibilities. They believe that instead of coordinating with the federal government, that they have to cooperate with the federal government. The federal government says we have to do this, and what we've ended up with here is, I mean, quite frankly, when you're going through the enumerated powers of the Constitution, there is nothing in there that says anything about the government being involved in education. So the entire Department of Education and all that together is unconstitutional. The EPA and everything about environmentalism and controlling your property over that and so forth is unconstitutional. HUD is unconstitutional, on and on and on. I read today something like 80% of the federal government could be cut back if the state legislatures would understand that they have these powers and that the federal government doesn't, and begin to get government out of all these things.
Yeah, it's such a key point that you hit on, Tom. See, the federal government understands this. That's why they're running around spending money like drunken sailors trying to bribe our state and our local governments. say, well, technically, yeah, we can't force you to do this, but hey, how would you like a $18 million grant for community improvement? All you got to do is sign on the dotted line here, and then we'll send the check right away. And, mayors say, oh, that sounds really appealing. What could I do with $18 million? And so we get this system where state and local government, the relationship really gets reversed. The federal government starts acting like the master because they're signing the paychecks instead of the other way around, where the states created the federal government and they are the masters of it. So it is going to take some backbones. It is going to take some intestinal fortitude for these state legislatures and for these governors and these mayors and these county commissions to say, look, we're going to just have to do without the federal money. Because when you sign on the dotted line, that's when they sink the hooks in you. But, we've looked at this pretty extensively, Tom, especially on the education front. And what we have found is that it seems like, and it's very hard to quantify these things. In fact, even the state governments have trouble quantifying them because grants are coming from so many different agencies and going on so many different things. But it looks very likely that complying with the cost of the federal mandates that come with the grant money is actually more expensive than the grant money itself. So if the federal government's, on average nowadays, it's about 10% of a state's education budget comes from the federal government. Well, if you're spending 20% of your education budget complying with and doing stupid things for the federal government, then it makes total financial sense to just cut out the federal government and say, look, we don't want your money. We're also not going to obey your regulations. And if you look at the way so many of these regulations and so many of these statutes are written, the federal government is oftentimes careful to say, if they are taking federal money, then they must. And the courts have upheld that. But if they're not taking that federal money, then the federal government has no leverage to force a state to teach something to the children or zone certain things in a certain way. So that really is a powerful way of standing up. And you don't have to pass any legislation. You can just say, we're not taking that money anymore. It's very simple. And then you don't have to do all the things that the federal government is trying to get you to do.
Yeah, and this is something that I've been talking about for a long time on the local level, the county level. People don't understand that they're looking at their city councils and they're looking at their mayor and they're saying, well, that's our government. That's what we elected. But behind them is this army of non-governmental organizations, private interest groups that almost every single issue that we're dealing with today, whether it's smart growth policies, transportation issues, power issues, everything, every one of those has even down to bike paths, every one of those has its own NGO organization that knows exactly how to sell that idea, and they have the grant money too. And so they come into the city council, they come into the county commission, and they present this. They've got it all in a nice, neat little box for you. You don't even have to think, and we got the money for you too. And this is what I've been warning about. These grant programs are the poison. They're the cancer cells that bring us all in, because they have written specifically in there, if you take this money, you have to do this and this and this. And that's how they've been imposing Agenda 21 and sustainable development policies for all these years. And as I've been advocating, that is where this is the first step in what we've been talking about in organizing on the local communities and so forth, is stopping that. So we begin to do that. Now we've got state legislatures, and we've got to find a way to begin to really educate them on the powers that they really have and the duty. It is their duty, because they put their hand up and they took that pledge that they would defend the Constitution, and they need to be held accountable for that. And do you have any thoughts on that, about what's the best way to begin to address state legislators and begin to train them on this?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And I think one of the best things that people can do is actually just go meet with their state representative. If you're working at the local level, you've got your local group, citizens of whatever county for freedom or something. Call up your state representative and talk to their assistant and say, look, we need to come in and we want to talk to you. Can we have 30 minutes? And we'd like to bring some materials. And can we educate you on this subject? And 9 times out of 10, they'll be happy to have a meeting. Oh, this is another chance to get some votes. So you come in there, you bring in a couple of, don't overload them. Don't drop 20 books on their desk, because they're not going to read them. But bring a pamphlet, bring your concerns, create some bullet points, and talk to them about it. And what you'll find is that a lot of them don't know these things, right? They didn't learn it in government school, that's for sure. They didn't learn it in legislator freshman orientation, right? In fact, they learned just the opposite. And I think it's also important, Tom, to debunk some of the false claims, because a lot of times now these legislators have already been prepared in advance by the other side. They say, oh, don't listen to those nullifications. That's racist, right? That is the Civil War settled that. When in reality, it's exactly the opposite. So come in with answers. And I'll take that one just as one example, because I've heard that from state legislators before. Somebody told them in their orientation that, oh, nullification, that's associated with the South during the Civil War. And so, we don't talk about that anymore. We can't do that. In fact, just the opposite is true. There was an incredibly successful example of states using nullification before the Civil War. And it wasn't the southern states. It was the northern states. Okay, the state of Wisconsin, as the premier example, the federal government had passed this Fugitive Slave Act, where they basically purported to require that if any slaves escaped from their masters in the slave states, they had to be captured and taken back to their masters by the government and the people of the northern states, the free states, where there was no slavery. Well, certain states said, well, we're just not going to do that, okay? Slaves are not a property, they are people. And so if they make it to our state, they can stay here. We're not going to kidnap them. We're not going to send them back in chains to be beaten by their master. Wisconsin State Supreme Court actually ruled that no, it's unconstitutional for us to send these people back because they're going to be deprived of their rights and so on. So the state of Wisconsin and other free states nullified the Fugitive Slave Act, and that was actually one of the reasons that South Carolina cited in their list of reasons why they were seceding from the Union, is because the northern states were nullifying what South Carolina viewed as a constitutional piece of legislation, which I think in retrospect was obviously not so. And so that's you got to come prepared with, first of all, the arguments why you think it's important. And then you got to anticipate, okay, what have they already heard? What were they told by the Republican Party leader or the Democratic Party leader about why they can't do this or why they shouldn't do this? You got to anticipate those. And really it's time-consuming work. There's not going to be a big reception for you, but it's very important work. And once you've managed to build a critical mass, if you can just get 3 or 4 or 5 legislators in your legislature to take up this banner, they can have an incredibly powerful impact. They can stand up on the floor and say, look, I think we need to do this. And they can educate all their colleagues on the info. And I've seen this before. You get a meeting with your legislator, you take them the information, and then they stand up on the floor of their legislature and they educate everybody in the room on this, and then really good things happen. So get a meeting, get a group of people together, get a meeting with your state senator, with your state representative, educate them on these things, bring a few, a limited number of resources, not big books and encyclopedias, but a limited number of things, maybe a DVD in case they're that kind of person, and just give them the education that they need. And, sometimes you'll find people who don't want to listen, and that's okay. Remove them during the next primary, remove them during the next election. But chances are very good that you'll get somebody who's willing to listen and may even be willing to take up that banner.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been teaching in our training here is about how to change the debate, to turn it around to go in our direction. And we actually have fantastic opportunity now, better than ever before, to begin to do that on several issues. Election corruption and fraud is a major one, but what you're going to run into, as you're saying, you go into some of these guys and they're just going to go, oh, come on, federal government passed this law, we've got to uphold that, and as you said, make off your case and so forth. And I think one of the big advantages that we have now is that the left has overstepped themselves so much now that those of us who have been wearing tinfoil hats and accused of conspiracy theories for decades, all of a sudden I have tinfoil falling off my hat like crazy anymore. It's like snow. And because now it's everybody, I'm getting so many calls from people saying, how did you know all this for so long? You were right. And this is an opportunity for us to make a major case and be listened to more than any time before. So you shouldn't be afraid to do that. But if they still refuse to listen to you, we have got to hold these guys accountable. They took a pledge that they would defend the Constitution. And if they won't even listen to these arguments of what that means, then we need to begin to make that the center of a campaign to get them out of office. They have already denied that they're going to support the pledge that they made to support the Constitution, and begin to make them a major part of the issue. I think that's, we've got to begin to make these elected officials accountable. And I know people are intimidated by it. We've been taught all our lives to respect authority, and you look at elected officials and say, yes, sir, and no, sir, but they're working for us. And that is exactly what we need to approach and make sure that they get that message as well. And I believe that if you knock one or two of them out of office using these arguments, you'll get their attention. We also have, Matt Shea gave me a package of bills that are all of them are designed to protect property rights, for example. And we came up with a tactic to go with this, that, as you said, if there are 5 or 6 legislators in your legislature that understand this, and they begin to form kind of a freedom coalition on it, but what if they could start talking to legislators in other state legislatures in other states and get them to do the same thing? What if you got 10 of them together and all of them started working on this issue together? Now you've created a movement, and you have much better chance of having people listen to you and get something done if you go in that direction with it. So all these tactics that we're talking about in other webinars and other of our training materials can be used this way. Let me ask you this real quick. What we're talking about state legislatures here, but do you believe city councils and county commissions could do exactly the same thing, take exactly the same efforts? We're not going to enforce this law in our city?
Absolutely, they can. And again, when people tell me this stuff doesn't work or we shouldn't do it, like, look, the Democrats have been doing it successfully for how long now? And for 4 years during the Trump administration. Look, I think, for example, the sanctuary states and the sanctuary cities, when it comes to illegal immigration, I really think that's an abuse of the power of nullification, because under the Constitution, the federal government does have delegated authority over naturalization and over things like that. And so I do think of immigration as a federal responsibility. But even then, the feds still can't coerce a city government or a county government to participate in the enforcement. And so to the extent that these cities and these states said, look, we're just not going to help you, they did it. They did it, right? How many states became sanctuary states? How many cities became sanctuary cities? So when someone tells you that that's not possible, all you got to do is say, look at the Democrats. And they're doing it on marijuana as well. And so conservatives need to start using the same kind of language. Look, you guys want to be sanctuary states on that? We're going to be sanctuary states for guns. We're going to be sanctuary states for property rights. We're going to be sanctuary states for unborn babies. We're going to be sanctuary states for religious liberty. For, pick your issue that people are interested in. And we need to start using these same tools. And I also think, Tom, on this issue of getting legislators involved, one of the big things I've found is theological. The overwhelming majority of Americans consider themselves to be Christian. Most legislators are very, very active in at least pretending to be Christian. And so when a pastor comes along and says, oh, Romans 13, you need to do what the federal government says, that carries a lot of weight with a lot of these legislators, if nothing else, because they know a lot of their constituents are hearing the same argument. But there is now a book that's been out for a few years now by Pastor Matt Trewhella. It's called The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates, A Proper Resistance to Tyranny and a Repudiation of Unlimited Obedience to Civil Government. I'm holding it in my hands here, and he has made a lot of inroads with legislators across the country by showing them that actually this is not only a constitutional argument, it's not only your constitutional obligation to intervene, the Bible makes the same case, and this has been part of the Christian tradition for thousands of years, that the lesser magistrates, whether that be your mayor or your sheriff or your city commission or your county commission or your governor, have not just the right to defy unlawful and illegitimate and immoral abuses of authority from the feds. They have a duty to do that. So there's that component of it, but absolutely, cities and counties should be doing this. And we're seeing more and more. In fact, I interviewed Matt Trewhella a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me about a county in Illinois where all the county commissioners had read his book, The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates, and they had passed unanimously a county resolution saying, look, Governor, we're not going to obey your dumb lockdown stuff. Yeah, you said businesses can't open until you say that's okay. Well, we say businesses can open right now. And the government said, well, we're going to send the state police over to shut them down. And the county commission said, no. And then the state police said, actually, we're not going to enforce that. And so voila, just like that, the very next day, Governor Pritzker of Illinois rescinded his order ordering businesses to be shut down. So this has incredible power at the local level, at the state level, at the county level, and we should be using this tool at every level of government where we have the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold that book up again. Hold it for a second so you can get a good shot of it. Yeah. Excellent.
It's called The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates. It's by Pastor Matt Trewhella of Wisconsin. And he first came to my attention because he gave the Election Day sermon in the Montana Capitol for the legislators in the state of Montana, instructing them on this. And his efforts on this are really starting to pay dividends now. And I also like what you said, Tom, about the states coming together. Trevor Loudon and Curtis Bowers, two very well-known, wonderful men in the freedom movement, have now started pushing this idea of a compact of state, not to be confused with a convention of states, this idea that we need to have a constitutional convention, but they're calling now for red states from, Montana and Idaho and South Dakota and Wyoming, all the way down into the South, down to Florida and Texas, forming an alliance. And we're seeing a lot of states now doing this, saying, look, it's not just our state that's not going to obey your silly climate decrees, your silly gun control, whatever it is they're trying to force down our throats. It's all of us, okay? And we bisect the entire country. Good luck trying to force, 28 states are in Republican hands now, 30 states are solidly in Republican hands now. Good luck, Washington, D.C., trying to force us all to bow down and do your bidding.
This is the key to, I think, everything. If you try to do it by yourself, if you're, for example, a store that's trying to stay open and not, be part of the lockdowns and or making people wear masks, if you're the only one, they come in, converge on you, put you in jail, shut you down, whatever. But if, as I've been saying, if every store in town or whatever group would come together en masse and do these things, what I see the left do is they run like crazy when they start to be faced by that kind of opposition. They don't know how to handle that. And when you're mentioning the religious aspect of it and so forth, I'm sure you've run into this too. When we're on a program or something, we're speaking, whatever, and we're saying, here, you need to do this, you need to do that. There's always that person who is there saying, don't worry, the Lord's going to take care of all of it. We don't have, it's already taken care of. Don't worry about it. I was on another meeting the other day, and somebody said something I thought was the most powerful argument to that I've ever heard. He said, God can't drive a parked car.
I love it.
If you are sitting on the sideline saying, the Lord's going to take care of everything, you're a parked car, and God can't help you do all that. He needs us to move forward and do this and take action. And as soon as I heard that, I about fell off my chair. That's the answer to that. Yeah,
it's perfect. And I mean, it's bad theology. These people say, oh, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just waiting to get raptured. The quicker things get horrible, the faster I'll be out of here. I mean, imagine if Moses had said, well, I'm not going to go confront Pharaoh. God, you do all the work, please. Imagine if the Hebrew midwives had said, oh, well, we'll just let God take care. We're going to kill all the baby Hebrew boys because Pharaoh said so, right? I mean, it's preposterous. It's completely unbiblical. And yet that is really one of the primary tools that they've used to get the Christian community in line. They've got a handful of distorted scriptures and bad theological arguments that have neutralized tens of millions of Christians who otherwise would be on the front lines with us fighting these battles, and who really should be if they actually believe that the Bible is true. Absolutely.
Yeah, they absolutely need to be. We've got to get these people all moving together with us and organizing. So, that's the key. We've got to educate. We've got to take action. We've got to organize. And as you said, we've got to get with these state legislators. There are ways that we can put pressure on them. We could put some kind of a thing for them to sign. Do you support the pledge you made to defend the Constitution? If so, then you need to join us on these issues and so forth, that we can, begin to put pressure on them in every way we can. But I think what I hope to do here soon is find a way to put together some seminars for them, for legislators in different states, and begin to teach them these things as well. And I think that's the fastest thing we can do. But all these things need to be done. But you and I can't do it all. People across this country in their own states, their own communities, are the ones that have to organize and do this. We can lead them to the trough, but we can't do it for them. So
that's right. Yep. And if your legislature is in session and it's not shut down right now, because right here in Florida, even though almost everything is open, our governor has been one of the best. Most of our local governments are okay. We've got, for example, where I am, no mask mandates, no shutdowns, no nothing. It's life is normal here. But even here, our legislature is kind of closed off to outsiders. But once those open back up, get a group of 15, 20 people and head to the Capitol and just go door to door. Hey, we'd like to talk to you about nullification. You guys agree. Almost every state now agrees that the federal government is out of control. Even a lot of the Democrats do. If you look at public polls, over 75% of Americans think the federal government is totally out of control. So knock on the door and, hey, do you think the federal government's out of control? Hey, well, we'd like to come in and talk to you about a solution. Hey, it's been tried. These states have done it. These states are considering it. This is an important issue to you. It's an important issue to your constituents. Here's how you do it. And I love what you said, Tom, too, about holding them accountable. You don't have to remove every single one of the bad guys to get your point across, right? Make a list of the 3 or 4 worst and concentrate there, knock them all out, and that'll send a really strong message to the rest of them. You better get in line. You better start supporting your oath. And if you don't, you're going to be one of the 3 or 4 we're going to take out next time around. And a couple of rounds of that, they'll get the message. It's slow. It's not a magic silver bullet that everybody's looking for, but it works. It's proven. We've shown it. And now if we could get more and more states to do it, it really would become unstoppable. Biden could sign with his pen, all day long, stupid executive orders, and they would just fall flat because nobody would enforce them and nobody would listen to them.
Yeah, absolutely correct. That's exactly what we have to do. And can't say it enough. We've got to get in there, get in their face, hold them accountable, and don't fear that, oh my gosh, the federal government's so big, there's nothing we can do to stop them. They're omnipotent. No, they're not. And it's just that nobody's standing up to them and letting them do it. But as we said before, now is the best opportunity here because they have shown themselves for exactly what they are. They're not hiding it in that quiet little innocent sounding language anymore. They're coming straight at us, and that makes it a lot easier to get a whole lot more people on our side with it. So absolutely. So nullification, standing up and saying absolutely not, that this is not a constitutional law, and we are not going to enforce this. It is null and void from the moment that the president put his pen to it. It is illegal, and we're not going to back it up. That is the message here. And organizing locally and in the state level, then fighting back on that. That is the what we have to do, and we can stop a whole lot of this. And once we start stopping the new stuff coming at us, then we can start pushing back on stuff that's already there that shouldn't be there, and we can restore the republic.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And I forgot to mention one thing too on getting state legislators on board. There are a lot of states right now that have excellent nullification bills in the legislature. So you might not even have to go find a legislator to introduce the bill for you. There already might be 4 or 5 in your legislature right now as we're speaking. Texas, Wyoming, South Dakota. These states have, some of them have actually comprehensive nullification bills where they want to create a permanent standing committee where every time the federal government passes a statute, this committee will look at it and make a recommendation to the legislature. Say, well, this one's unconstitutional. And it goes over to the legislature, and the legislature says, yep, we agree with the committee. This legislation is unconstitutional. We're not going to enforce it. It's not going to be enforced in the state of Texas. So if you are lucky enough, if you are blessed enough to live in one of the states that already has those bills introduced or that has already passed some of those, find who your allies are, find what the key issues are. If there's already a bill that's going to be heard soon, try to rally support for it. Get people to call their legislators to get them to co-sponsor. So in some cases, a lot of the groundwork has already been laid. You mentioned the John Birch Society has been working on this for a very, very long time, plowing the ground. And so now, a lot of it is just, we got to go in and reap the harvest. There are lots of bills that have been introduced. You've done heroic work on that, Tom, as well, in terms of introducing bills. to nullify sustainable development nonsense and these UN agreements. So there's a good chance, especially if you're in a Republican state, there's a good chance that there is already nullification legislation in your legislature about to be considered or being considered. And that takes out 2 steps from the process that we described. Now just get people behind that one. And once you show that you can do it on gun rights, hey, well, why can't we do it on issue X, Y, and Z?
Yeah. Let me clarify something here, because as I've been reading what Madison and Jefferson and so forth said, that we didn't have to do a bill, that that is just the action that the state should take, which is no action. We're just not going to enforce this law coming from Congress. And so is that your impression? We have to have a bill?
No, I don't think we have to have a bill, but I think when there is a specific state law that gives cover to everybody involved, it makes it even easier. But I mean, if a governor were to say, hey, this federal law that purports to require that we teach children this, or that we regulate property rights in this way, that's unconstitutional. I'm just going to tell my state agencies not to cooperate. No legislation needed. And the governor of Oklahoma has just done that. Governor Kevin Stitt in Oklahoma. Go read the executive orders he passed. No legislation at all. He just said, look, these things that they're doing up in Washington, D.C., they're illegal. They're unconstitutional. They have no right to do these things. And so we here in Oklahoma, I'm ordering all the state agencies to just proceed as if those things hadn't happened. Just go on with life as normal. So no legislation was needed. However, a lot of police chiefs, a lot of bureaucrat chiefs, and high-ranking bureaucrats in the bureaucracies, they would rather have some sort of state law to act as kind of a shield. So when the feds come in and start arm twisting, they can say, no, look, my boss is the state legislature. They're the ones that sign my paycheck, and they said no. So you take it up with them, right? It makes it much easier. And then the elected officials can say, hey, my constituents, as to what are the feds going to do? Go terrorize your whole community? Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good clarification. Well, I appreciate it, Alex. So wonderful to have you on. And is there anything else you wanted to bring up in any way? Anything that we haven't covered?
Oh, well, I appreciate you having me on, Tom. I appreciate what you're doing here. Training local activists is, I think, one of the most important things we could be doing. And guys, I actually just did, probably in the next 10 minutes, I did a short episode of my show Behind the Deep State on the subject of nullification. It was just a coincidence that Tom called and asked if we could do nullification right now. But this is an incredibly powerful tool that we have at our disposal. The left has understood this for a long time. And if you don't believe me, go to Denver and look at all the pot shops. Go to California and look at all the pot shops, right? They've been using it for their purposes very successfully for years. And we can use it for our purposes, for preserving freedom, for preserving property rights, for preserving prosperity as well. So our arsenal of tools is pretty limited, but this is one of the most powerful weapons we have at our disposal. So it will pay dividends to get yourself well informed on this. We've got a lot of good articles on this at the New American. There's been whole books written about it. So get yourself really informed, get together with your local people and make a plan. Tom and I just give a whole bunch of ideas of what you can do. I really hope that people will get serious about that. And it's thanks to the heroic efforts of people like you watching this that we have kept our freedom for this long, and hopefully that we will keep it for much longer and hand it down to our posterity. So thank you so much for having me, Tom. Thank you for what you're doing. And thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. And everybody needs to get a subscription to the New American and get all of your wisdom that way. Ladies and gentlemen, we are doing these training exercises, teaching you how to fight back on the local level. We've got our manual, which we'll tell you about here in a little bit, and our activist handbook, rather, that will teach you how to stand up and organize on the local level. We know a lot of you have never been involved before, and your question is, it's just me, I'm only me, I don't know how to do this. We're going to try to help you with that. And we're also looking for local and state organizations that are already organized, that we can begin to lead people to you so that you can help keep them active and grow your own organization, but also to be effective in all these programs that we're teaching. And we've got some organizations around the country that are starting on the state level to put their own training programs together. And I hope that will grow across the country. If we can get 50 states doing that, we will mow these guys down and we will restore the republic. So I appreciate it, and keep your ears open, keep everything ready. We're going to have more coming at you. One of the things that I'm most concerned about, and that's why we did this one today, is we have so many people who run up against the fear of government. The government is omnipotent. The government is too big. We can't stand up to it. If we try to fight back, they're going to do this. That is not true. And there are legal means that we can take. And I've got some more coming up that we'll be talking about in the future. But I think this was the most important one to get started, nullification. So we appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Hi, this is Tom DeWeese from the American Policy Center. And I want to tell you about the full program that we are putting together as we put these webinars together. The webinars are the first part of what we are working on to help local activists become citizen ninjas, become powerful to fight on the local level, to stand up to things and these policies and your city councils and your county commissions, and effectively push back on the things that they're putting together. And we're putting together the series of webinars. And one of the things you can do with these webinars is keep them. They'll be available on our website at americanpolicy.org. You can share them with others. You can watch them over and over again. You can use them as programs for organizations that you're already part of and begin a training process there. We've got to get a cadre of trained activists to stand up to the forces that we are up against. What we're facing, you can see by watching your television every night now, what we are up against in an opposition that is highly trained to absolutely destroy the Republic of the United States of America, your property rights, your ability to live your life as you choose. And what we are doing here is working to counter that effort that they are putting together, and begin to restore our liberties. And again, the webinars are the first part of that. And the second thing that we've done is we've put together this activist handbook to how to fight back on the local level. In fact, the webinars are basically designed to bring this to life. Let me just share with you some of the things that are in this manual. I don't think anybody has ever put together a more comprehensive tool for you to use in these cases. First of all, we've got a great deal of information in here about the real enemy that you're facing. The Green New Deal, the Agenda 21, sustainable development policies that are taking over every single community. And I know if you've been an activist, you've gone to try to talk to your city councilman and so forth, and they'll tell you, never heard of it, don't know what that is, tell me something about it, whatever. Well, we've got all the details here and why it's bad news. And one of the things we're focusing on in the manual is how to take the offensive for liberty, and how to create your community as a freedom pod, where you are in your community alone. You are fighting back to restore and protect private property, free enterprise, and your personal freedom of choice. Those are the American pillars of freedom that we've all enjoyed through the history of the United States that are now under attack. We're teaching you how to fight back with those things. Particularly, we're focusing on the local governments. Everybody wants to get involved in the presidential campaigns and work on with Congress or whatever, but we believe that the most effective thing you can do to fight back is start on the local level, and it will grow up to the state legislature and then on into Congress and so forth. But it rarely works the other way, and we focus on that in the manual. We're going to talk about some of the organizations, the NGO organizations that are in your communities and how they operate. The National Association of Realtors, and how they have absolutely betrayed the whole issue of property rights, which they ought to be the leading advocate for. The American Planning Association, and how they've taken over every single community in this country and putting in plans. They say free enterprise doesn't work, so they have to have their planning. That should give you a real hint as to what their planning is really about. But they call it smart growth. They're destroying private property ownership, and so forth. We're going to talk about how to take legislative action. And we have put together a package of 5 bills that are all designed to cut back on the size, cost, growth, reach of government that is particularly on private property rights. And we're going to teach you and legislators how to use these bills in legislators and start a movement across the country. We're going to go into great detail about that. Taking the offense to restore our liberty is what this is all about, and how to become a citizen ninja. We've got 8 rules for successful activists to follow. What those are, how to organize, how to research. We've got in here a city survey. If you take this document and fill it out, a city survey on your community, and you will find what kind of programs you have there, who's involved, what they are. Once you get this whole document filled out, you'll know everything you need to know about your city and how to begin to fight back. It's a very, very valuable tool, and it's in the manual. How to write effective letters to the editor, and how to use the media, not just newspapers and television and radio, but also social media, and how we need to use those things and organize and get your message out. We have some tools in here that are extremely effective, and a lot of them are used to call out your elected officials. Do they stand for free enterprise, private property, and limited government, or are they promoting these massive government programs? We have some resolutions asking them to sign, whether they do or not, and if they don't sign, you've got your answer. We've got a pledge for elected officials and candidates to sign. Guys running for office, and he says, "Oh yeah, I'm with you." Well, here's a resolution for him, a pledge for him to sign, saying that he supports private property rights. Now, if he signs it, wonderful. And if he starts to betray that when he gets into office, you've got that document in hand to say, "Hey, what are you doing here? This is what you said you believed in when we elected you." These kind of things. We've got a whole lot of handouts that you can produce and hand out to people on various issues, conservation easements and other attacks on private property. And wherever it fits your need, we can have that there. And we have a section in the manual talking about how to take back the elective process, how to get into your precinct organization. And if you organized your own precinct, you could become a very powerful person in your community. Elected officials or candidates would come to you, say, "Help me." And you could say, "Where do you stand? What do you stand for?" That'll determine whether I help you or not. This is in the manual. One of the big things that I've been working on for the last year and a half is a means to make elected officials personally responsible for their own actions. How do you do that? There are some legal actions that can be taken. We now have a couple of them that one of them has to deal with the 14th Amendment. One of them has to deal with the Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act. We're going to have webinars on this, and we're going to teach you, and it's in the manual as well, how to deal with these things. And then we have just a whole lot of documents. Do you know what the Wildlands Project is? We've got a document in here that'll tell you what it is. It's how they're taking rural land. Do you know what complete streets are? We've got a document in here that'll tell you what that is. And international building codes, controls on urban growth, the AFFH bill from HUD, affirmatively furthering fair housing, which, by the way, the Trump administration has now said they're going to take away, but the National Association of Realtors says, "Well, we'll pick up the ball and take that instead." That, again, shows you their betrayal. National heritage areas and so forth. All of these are documents and much, much more in this manual that we have now put together, and it's all available for you on, I'll tell you what, the manual itself now is ready on Amazon and on our website at AmericanPolicy.org, and it is $49.99 to just buy it outright. However, a lot of these programs, a lot of these documents, a lot of the research documents that are just too big to put into this document, we now have those. We have on our website called a toolkit, and that toolkit has a lot of these documents. It has also where in the manual we do have some of these handouts that you can use, but it's kind of hard to get them out of the book, so you can download them from the website. And all of these kinds of documents and more, we're getting ready to put together some another section on the website where we can document the activists in different communities and actions they've taken successfully or not, sample legislation, all that sort of thing. And by the way, in here we have a kit of 5 bills that have been presented to us, provided for us by state legislator Matt Shea in Washington State, that all focus on limiting government and protecting private property. And those are downloadable on the toolkit, on the website. So it's all in there together. And what we're asking with all of these details, you know, about a year or 2 years ago, I put out a 5-point action plan of how to restore all this. The webinars are the first part of that action plan. The website is another part that, as we're putting it together, and as that is being developed. And we're working on, and again, putting these media sources together, as I mentioned, the radio shows, things like that. Those are all part of that action plan. Well, you know, it takes some funds to put all these things together. So what we're asking is, you can get the manual for just $49.99 on Amazon, or for a donation of at least $100, you can have access to everything, the manual itself and the toolkit, and all the updates that we give as they come along, and lots and lots of other information that will be coming down the pike as we do that. You will be part of the team. Just a donation, a one-time donation of $100, and you'll have access to all of that. So our goal is to restore the Republic of the United States of America and all the freedoms that we were guaranteed to be protected in our Constitution. That is our goal. We are up against a massive force, as you know, but we can beat them. And they are terrified that you're going to learn the information that we're providing here. And the last thing they want is for you to know this information. So get the information, become a powerful citizen ninja in your own community, how to organize, how to fight back, all the details, everything you need, all of it comes together. If you can see your way to give us a donation of at least $100 one time, then you will have access to all of it. So I hope you'll do that. I hope you'll join us, and let's take America back. Thank you.